Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy, and in this video, we're going to continue to chat about my great-grandfather Willie's second marriage to Jessie. And these are old family tales about my grandmother's people, so if you need visuals, there are links posted in the description outlining both of my grandparents' family trees. Okay, so at the end of the last video, we were chatting about Aunt Allie's prophetic dream about her Aunt Callie and the two small children in the community. Now, this part right here is a tall tale that my grandmother's sister Aunt Allie told our half-cousin in 1980, and he fell for it. So this comes straight out of our half-cousin's manuscript, but I have applied some mild editing for clarity's sake. Okay, so here we go. The following recollection brought tears to Allie's eyes as she recalled with sad emotions her sweet little sister. On the day of Callie's funeral, the entire Williams clan attended. Helene was said to be a playful child, but on this day she didn't feel well and wanted Allie to hold her. It's said that when Callie was lowered into the ground, Allie wanted to be nearby as they buried her, so she stayed near the gravesite. And, not much more than a child herself, Allie says she didn't understand the impact this might have on Helene, until the little girl cupped her hands around Allie's face, saying, "Ash, Ash, poor Aunt Tally. They put her in a deep hole and covered her up." Okay, y'all. Aunt Allie missed her calling. She should have gone to Hollywood. She was a great actress. And the reason I say this, y'all, is because it's extraordinary that anyone bought into the notion that Helene could construct such a sentence, much less speak it out loud. She was only 15 months old. And yeah, I said months. This is what I'm talking about. With Allie's ability to embellish a story in her favor. She wanted to tell the best stories, and she made sure that she did. But the fact remains that Caledonia May Fuller, known as Callie to her friends and family, died on September 23rd, 1919 in Ouachita Parish, Louisiana. She was the first wife of Ed Fuller, my great-grandmother Lizzie's brother. And soon thereafter, two small children in the community did follow, and my family would never be the same. And it was probably during this time that Jessie became ill, because, as the story goes, Jessie wouldn't take time to put on her shoes on cold mornings. Our half-cousin says that, as a direct result of this, it's said that she contracted the flu. When her illness worsened and she began to cough up blood, Willie took her to see Dr. Hood in Eris. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And I do have a few questions about this story, but I'll tell you a bit more of it first, the way it's recorded in our half-cousin's manuscript. So, it appears that Willie took Jessie and their three children, Annie Mae, Elsie, and Helene, up to Ruston, where Jessie's sister, Mamie Waldron, lived, because she said they had a lung specialist there. It's reported that they stayed with the Waldron family for 2 to 3 weeks, while the doctor ran test after test after test on Jessie. And the family was hopeful that she would recover. The death of another wife was not what Willie needed right now. Not with all these little kids that he and Jessie had had during their 10-year marriage. 3. Okay, so I do have a few questions about this. Firstly, if they were in Ruston for 2 to 3 weeks, what about the other children? Aunt Sally would have been about 16 and Aunt Allie about 13. And James, Aubrey, and Mamie are all in that age group, or younger, too. So what'd Willie do? Leave them all alone to fend for themselves for 3 weeks? I mean, and secondly, now we have Willie's second wife, who, just like his first wife, has caught the flu and ends up coughing up blood. What is up with that? And y'all, I don't believe in coincidences. For me, everything happens for a reason. But nevertheless, let's get back to the story. So anyway, Willie and Jessie and their children are in Ruston at her sister's house because it's closer to the doctor's office. Our half-cousin states all these doctor visits gave Willie and Jessie hope for her survival, but their hopes were dashed by Jessie's prognosis. There wasn't anything that could be done for Jessie. Her life expectancy was 3 to 5 years. Okay, so in the same paragraph detailing the Ruston trip, our half-cousin says it was unknown to the family that Helene had contracted the croup, and that it was not known how Helene could have caught this sickness since she had been at home most of the time. Okay, y'all, this does not make sense to me. He just said that she was with them in Ruston, going back and forth to this doctor's office for 2 to 3 weeks. Yet, he says they don't know where she caught it from. Apparently, y'all, critical thinking is not a skill that's handed out to everyone. Just saying. But anyway, the next bit, y'all, I think Aunt Allie told, so we'll take it with a grain of salt. But as the story goes, Helene and Allie were very close, and that much, y'all, I don't doubt. My grandmother loved her half-siblings and her step-siblings just as much as her full siblings, and some, maybe more, depending upon which full sibling we're talking about. So I have no doubt that Allie and Helene were close. But anyway, as Aunt Allie reports to our half-cousin, you know, because they were so close, there was no surprise that as Helene became sicker, all she wanted was for Aunt Allie to hold her. And remember, y'all, Helene turned 16 months old on the day she died. So, she was not the smooth-talking toddler of 3 or 4 that Aunt Allie would have us believe. But anyway, from our half-cousin's account, Aunt Allie seems to beat herself up a lot over this part. She too, being a kid herself, Aunt Allie was 12 when Helene was born. So she'd get tired of holding her little sister and want to put her down. And remember, Helene did not live to the age of 2. Nowhere close to it. She was only a year and a half on the day she died. But anyway, not even a year and a half because she was only 16 months old. But anyway, apparently this would upset Helene. And Allie, being a kid herself, she didn't want to hold her little sister all the time. And so, she'd put her down. And, I believe this much is true. I also believe that Aunt Allie shouldered that guilt her entire adult life. Maybe that's the reason for her tears when she talked about Helene to our half-cousin in 1980. Maybe it's her guilt coming out. That said, I don't feel like a child should ever have to shoulder a burden such as this. But here we are. Anyway, while our half-cousin calls it the croup, y'all should know, my grandmother always said it was diphtheria. But at this point in the story, none of the Williamses know just how sick Helene really is. And Allie reports that as a kid, excuse me, one of her daily chores was to walk the cows from the pasture to the creek for water in the late afternoon or early evening. On one of those evenings, Helene begged her sister to let her come along. Allie states that she asked Jessie if Helene could go, to which Jessie replies, well, she is kindly sick, but I guess it won't hurt her. I'll get a cap for her to wear. Seriously, y'all? She's kindly sick? Well, I'm assuming that's kind of sick. Yet, Jessie grabs Helene's hat and sends her off into the cool evening air. See, I was right. Jessie wasn't fit to raise a dog, much less kids. Meanwhile, Jessie herself ain't been doing too good, and my grandmother has been coming over to her father's house daily to take care of the old bitch. And the sad part is she had to bring her firstborn son, Oliver, along with her. And just as an FYI, Oliver was born September 3rd, 1917. So, he's like 2 years old during this time. And while my grandmother took care of Jessie's sick butt, Oliver and Helene played together. And where were Jessie's children, you might ask? Well, we'll get to that. But anyway, nobody in the family knew that Helene was contagious at the time. Least of all, my grandmother. If she had known, she never would have taken Oliver over there. And whether it was croup or diphtheria is irrelevant, really, because whatever it was, it sure overtook those children quickly. Remember, Helene was basically fine at Callie's funeral. Yeah, they said she wasn't feeling too good, but she was well enough to attend. So, she died. Callie died in late September, of the same year. And by mid-October, Helene is dead. But nevertheless, after the walk down to the creek with Helene, Allie says she realized for the first time that Helene was really, really sick. So sick, in fact, that she might not recover. And y'all, if Aunt Allie could see this at 13, I gotta wonder why Jessie couldn't see it. But unfortunately, on October 11th, 1919, Helene died. It was the day she turned 16 months old. It was around the time of Helene's death that my grandmother's firstborn, my Uncle Oliver, became sick. My grandmother told me that her father held Oliver as he struggled to draw his last breaths. And her worst fears came true on October 24th, 1919, when Oliver drew his last breath. He had just turned 2 on September 3rd. And I can tell y'all, the death of my Uncle Oliver affected my grandparents deeply. But we'll talk more about that in my grandmother's video. So anyway, this is where Aunt Allie's dream comes full circle as she reflects back on it in 1980, saying that now she realized that the larger coffin was Callie's and the 2 smaller coffins were Helene and Oliver's. And whether she had the dream or not, I don't know. I can't say. But I'd take it with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying. But anyways, in the paragraph following the end of Aunt Allie's prophetic dream story in our half-cousin's manuscript, there is a short note of an incident that I can place between the deaths of Helene and Oliver, which was, October 11th to the 24th. Sorry, guys. My dogs are barking. Sorry. But it's also worth noting, though, that this has nothing to do with Helene and Oliver or Callie or Jessie. Nevertheless, in 1917, 2 years earlier, the Ouachita Parish Police Jury issued an order of mandatory dipping for cattle. And it said that the VAT was provided on October 13th, 1919, and this is just 2 days after Helene's death. But it said that Willie and the other residents refused to drive their cattle to this mandatory dipping. In the oral history of Cadeville, Charles W. Lusk says the vat was blown up shortly after it was erected. Locals contended that the government didn't need to tell them how to run their businesses. Maybe that's where I get my rebellious side from, Willie. Okay, so anyway, the deaths of Helene and Oliver pretty much usher in the demise of Jesse. And we're going to get into that in the next video, because with Jesse's death, the ghost stories are back, y'all. And they get kicked up a notch now. So, until next time, later gators.